The 2025 AI in L&D report is out, the latest annual research from Eglė, Vinauskaitė and Don Taylor on how learning and development is using artificial intelligence. It marks what the authors call an implementation inflection, a tipping point where more than half of L&D teams now say they are actively using AI, not just experimenting. Adoption is spreading into analytics, coaching, role plays, and even AI as a thought partner, while trust, privacy, and integration remain big challenges. To understand what's changed, it's worth looking back. Last year's report showed that most teams were still using AI mainly to speed up content creation, while the real breakthroughs came from those applying it more strategically in skills intelligence, workforce planning, and personalizing learning. It also revealed how many organizations were stuck at early stages of adoption, held back by trust, skills, and data concerns. So, with this year's report pointing to a clear turning point, the big question now is, what does this mean for the future of learning and development? And to help answer that, the authors Eglė Vinauskaitė and Don Taylor are here on Learning News with me. A very warm welcome to you both. The report describes an implementation inflection, a tipping point where AI moves from novelty to part of the toolkit. What did the research uncover about this moment, and why is it significant?
Rob, firstly, thank you for a fabulous introduction. I wish everyone who interviewed us took as much care over actually thinking about this as you clearly have. The inflection point that we've noted is, as you said, that more than half of people now report that they are using L&D. That's as opposed to experimenting with it or in some sort of pre-use phase where they're thinking about it, but they haven't touched it. And that's a significant jump. Last year it was 40%, this year it's 54%. That's a big jump, and the rest of it has been squeezed. I think two things have happened. Firstly, some people have naturally moved from an experimentation phase to a wider use of it phase. But I don't think that explains everything. I think other people have just seen what's happening and thought, okay, it's safe now. I feel confident with this. I'm going to step in and use it, and have leapfrogged over the experimentation phase to go straight into use. I think that's the only way we can explain such a big jump in the numbers. Eglė, I don't know if you agree with that perception, but my view is that there's been a fundamental shift that now AI is seen as being a regular thing that you use rather than an interesting tool to play with.
Yes, absolutely. I would agree with your interpretation, and it tracks with what we're also seeing in the research outside of our industry. For example, by McKinsey, which has also showed that the AI penetration has increased in the past year in comparison to 2024, and that also I think it's also important to recognize that for L&D. What matters to us is not just what's happening with AI L&D specifically, but how AI is perceived and how it's used in the rest of the organization, because that influences the role that we play as a function. So I think that these, like the majority of people using AI right now in L&D, it does raise different questions that we didn't ask in 2024.
So strong and positive news here to start with. Where are the barriers today, Eglė and Don?
The barriers are almost exactly the same as the barriers last year. The two key barriers that people report are data privacy and security and lack of trust in AI outputs. And then the third one, and these are the same order as the top three last year, lack of skills in the L&D team. Now, the fact that these things haven't changed isn't perhaps surprising. What is surprising is that other things aren't higher up the list. Concerns about cost aren't very high up. And we noted last year that really that should be higher, because if you're doing it properly, you might have to spend some serious money. Also, resistance and lack of engagement, and Eglė was very strong on this last year, that should be higher up the list, and it's actually well down the list. It's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. It's the 8th on the list, barely registering against the security and trust concerns. So what this shows to me is that perhaps the barriers we're facing are the barriers of initial skepticism and not using AI in a very in-deep, sophisticated way. One change from last year makes me think that there's this shift towards more sophisticated use. Well, two changes. Two barriers reported a much higher proportion of the vote this year than last year: integration issues and concern over regulatory barriers. Now, those two things happen, integration and concern about regulation, when you're using AI in a more sophisticated way, because you're using it typically with other systems to do things beyond just learning. So that suggests to me that we are moving slowly towards more sophistication, even though the barriers largely remain the same around trust.
The report highlights a move from experimentation to more sophisticated applications. So analytics, role plays, coaching, even AI as a thought partner. What does the survey reveal about these uses and how that might be changing the role of L&D?
I wouldn't say that they are changing the role of L&D per se, as much as they're helping L&D do a better job, because they're giving L&D the tools that it has long needed. So, for example, analytics. And in our case, we're mostly talking about qualitative analysis of feedback survey responses, which is right now the most common use of analytics with AI. It helps L&D be more intentional. It helps L&D track the reception of the learning programs and remaining knowledge gaps. And then take role play or coaching as another example. It replaces what some of what used to be content. It replaces content with skills practice, with reflection practice, with coaching tools. And thought partnership, again, helping L&D professionals at all levels, from learning designers to learning leaders, think for decisions, strategies, ideas, frameworks. We've seen really interesting examples of how that thought partnership kind of combines with some skills work and helps people think through skills frameworks for various roles, which also makes some of the skills work accessible to organizations without buying into these more sophisticated enterprise skills intelligence tools. So I would say that perhaps not changing the role of L&D, but helping it do a better job.
Let's come on to personalization, which seems to mean more than adaptive pathways. It's becoming about AI coaching, individual development plans, and performance support in the flow of work. How significant might this shift be for L&D's value proposition?
I'm going to jump in quickly to give a sketch on this, and I'll invite Eglė to follow up. For me, personalization is a sort of portmanteau word that we use to cover a whole bunch of different things that you just described. But I think it's a very apt one to use. I mean, we can say, I'm going to do personalization. It can mean 10 different things. But the point is in the word. People increasingly are used to living in a personalized world as consumers. So therefore, in terms of our proposition, if we go out able to offer that personalization, whether it's in learning pathways, skills, coaching, or whatever, we are responding to that. And the alternative, of course, is that faced with people who are used to and expecting a personalized approach, if we offer a one-size-fits-all course, we're much less likely to get traction. Eglė, I've given a very surface-level gloss on that. Do you want to say anything else?
Perhaps a few thoughts about the significance of the shift. Because frankly, we're just going to see which way it's going to go. Because on one hand, these are very useful tools in the L&D toolbox to make learning more relevant and contextual, which are both really good things, and it's good for L&D, for the individual, for the organization. On the other hand, some of these capabilities are self-service. If I want a personalized version of content as a user, I can do this myself with AI. If I want to quickly find something in the organization's knowledge base with an embedded AI assistant, again, it helps me get what I need without going to L&D, going to the LMS or wherever. So I think it's one of these forces that L&D is going to have to contend with and make sense of, because it has to decide where it can add value when some of that personalization can be done by the individual themselves.
And Rob, this kind of leads on to the final point. Where are we headed? I think very well put, Eglė.
Yes, finally, and I can't believe we're using the word finally, having looked at a 63-page report in just over 10 minutes. And I would very much encourage everybody to come and get this report. towards the end of the report, you outline 3 possible futures for L&D, and you call this a transformation triangle, each quite different, or each end rather, I should say, quite different. Can you sketch this out for us?
Eglė, do you want to sketch the 3 nodes of the triangle, and then I can perhaps try to paint the bigger picture around it?
Let me see how to best explain it, because we're trying to do with this triangle, we are trying to answer this "what's next" question, because fundamentally, it is a possible future that L&D might not be needed in an organization. It's not unimaginable that some organization is going to think that, you know what, people can find work, create their own content. We can have systems that can serve some knowledge bits autonomously, and if we need something special, we're just going to bring in a vendor to do some training and so on. So we don't need L&D. When we started asking this question about what's next, we identified 3 directions which are distinctly different. So one way that L&D can go is that it can reassert itself as a skills authority. In this future, L&D stays relevant by making skills a core business currency and applying deep learning expertise to build them at scale. So we're talking about organizations that recognize skills as a business resource, that track those skills, that talk about skills outside of L&D. So it's not just L&D imposing its own language. And that enables L&D to establish its authority. It becomes the custodian of that resource and an expert in how to grow it. And the expert part is really important because then L&D needs to really professionalize in it. So that's one future. Another option is for L&D to reposition and become what we call an enablement partner. In this future, L&D embraces decentralization, says, you know what, we accept that we don't know best. How about we give people elsewhere in the field the tools, the structure, the support they need so that they can capture their knowledge. They can perhaps create their own tools. And in this case, L&D arguably goes up the strategy ladder and may end up working on higher level, more strategic initiatives or global learning initiatives, transformation, change, and whatnot. So that's the enablement partner option. And the third option is for L&D to reforge and become what we call an adaptation engine. And essentially, this is, well, I would say this is the most radical future where L&D is no longer a standalone function. It gets absorbed into a blended team that addresses business challenges holistically and embeds this adaptability within the organization. But crucially, it's not that L&D works with other parts of the business on the learning slice of the problem. It's that there is no L&D function per se. There might be a skill set within a team that is led by something that's not L&D.
Thank you. And Don, I don't know if I can ask you on that point, but how do you, we talked about this almost like an option, like L&D have an option here and they can pick off a menu. I want to be the skills custodian, or I want to be one of the other ends of the triangle, but it's not going to be as simple as that, is it? It's going to depend on culture and all sorts of things in the business. How do you see this playing out?
I think the key, you're absolutely right. There isn't any, we're not sitting in a restaurant making a nice choice from a menu here. 2 things are apparent here. Firstly, the direction we go in will be, as you say, determined by the culture of the organization. And we list in the report a number of factors that will determine the direction that we go in. So it might be that you're in the type of organization where understanding the skills of your people is tremendously important and the culture of the organization supports that. It's also important to note that you may, and it's quite likely, be an organization where you decide to be an enablement partner. So to shift towards being decentralized in content production, but centralized in the things that matter, which will include skills. So it's not as if one of these necessarily rules out the other. So that's one thing. As you say, the culture and the context will determine what's the right direction to go in. And the other thing is, there is no choice about that. And I think that's the crucial thing about this conclusion. We've got this triangle, okay? In the middle of the triangle, we see L&D as it is now, focused on content. It can't stay there. If it stays there, it gets drowned in a wave of content that's created by people in the organization using tools and people outside the organization using tools that are free or very cheap. Content is no longer a differentiator. So from that central position, we have to move out to one of these points on the triangle. It could be the skills authority, it could be the enablement partner, it could be the adaptation engine. But after a day spent with Eglė, mulling this over, talking about it, going backwards and forwards in London, I found myself walking through St. James's Park, and this line from Yeats came into my head: things fall apart, the center cannot hold. And that just struck me as being absolutely on point here. The center, where we've always been, cannot hold anymore. We have to move out and we have to change, because the alternative is that we fix ourselves to what we've always done, creating content, and people don't see the value in that because it's now so cheap to produce. L&D simply fades away. There was another quote from Yeats that also jumped into my head at the same time, but it was too negative to put into the report. All is changed utterly. A terrible beauty is born, which is, it's typical Yeats, and it's this contrast of how things happen when they change. We are heading to a new future. It will be beautiful. For some people, it will be terrible. We have to make a choice.
Just before we finish, take us through the structure of the report. I know there's lots of case studies. It's packed with information. Take us through it.
Yeah, so in the report, you are going to find, obviously, the section where we talk about the trends and numbers in terms of AI use and blockers and so on. However, the middle part of the report includes 5 case studies. I think several, maybe 10 snapshots of more detailed explanations of how some more inspiring use cases of AI, and then pages and pages. I think something like close to 20 pages of examples categorized across from across the entire industry about these various use cases of AI and L&D. So if you're thinking about how I might be using AI and L&D, or how are others doing it, am I missing out on something, in the report we have a lot of information about that in quite a great detail.
Well, Eglė, Don, thank you so much for sharing your insights with me today. This is the topic of our time, and many in L&D are feeling anxious and uncertain about what AI means for their work, and your research is helping to bring some clarity about some of the ways forward. There is a link in the report, a link in the notes to the report today, as I've mentioned, and viewers can head over there and get themselves a copy. It's been a real pleasure having you on the programme today. Eglė Vinauskaitė and Don Taylor, thank you.
Thanks, Rob.
Thanks, Rob.